Alright guys, TacticalRab again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Nadeshot going off on the main stage last night against the current state of Call of Duty and exactly what needs to change if the game wants to be getting back to a good state over the next couple of years. But also FeLo with a few words to Mr. BenJNissim after more criticism he has levelled at players over the last few days. FeLo says that he needs to wise up and take it back. If you want any chance of being respected within a community, very much interested in your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. First of all, this from the Subliners Academy. It's, well, apparently no longer a thing, but it kind of is. Humza, Wiz, Big Head, and Crazekin, these are the guys that are going to be involved, but they're now calling it the lag liners, right? You know, they did that thing when Los Angeles Guerrillas, they basically ran out of money, they wouldn't do any social media promotion, so Subliners would step in and kind of cover their matches for them. Then the Subliners tried to release some, like, merch for the lag liners, or whatever they want to call themselves, but I guess Guerrillas reached out and said, hey, we didn't give you permission to use our logo for this, so that ain't happening. Speaking of challenges, though, JoeDeceives, of course, is still on the bench of the Los Angeles Thieves, and I said at the time when he went down to challenges, I think it was a good idea, really, when they benched him to keep him on the bench, because, you know, in other cases, let's say Vegas, Standy is gone, but Standy is dropped. He's, you know, they could bring him back, but he's not putting any pressure on their players to keep performing, whereas for JoeDeceives, Afro knows full well, and he had a bad series against OpTic, if he doesn't turn around that performance and start to hold a pre-aim for once in his life, it seems, at least in this game, then Joey D will quite possibly be the man to come in instead. I wouldn't be surprised at all if over the coming weeks Joe D is back in the team and Afro is potentially gone, especially because he's looking pretty good in challenges on the FaZe back team, of course. Lunas as well is another name that's definitely been linked from the AR side. There's been plenty of talk about him, you know, to Surge or some team like that maybe need to change in that role. Even we'll discuss Big Wake here in a second on the Minnesota Rocker. There are some questions if you need a better AR Slayer role that with a bit more pace maybe, Lunas could be the man to go for, because you can see the comparison here between Lunas and Breck in terms of engagements. Bit of a faster paced player, maybe that's what Minnesota Rocket needs, and we'll see what BenJNissim has to say on that in just a couple of seconds. But yeah, Joey D, particularly good in the series. Lost the series though, pretty sure they lost the series here, game 5, which is pretty outrageous. But definitely big questions to be asked on the Los Angeles Thieves. We talked about them in quite some depth last night. There's also plenty of problems with the game though, even as Brian Saint says, the current hardpoint spawns might be the worst that I've ever seen in CoD. Think I genuinely prefer squad spawns. Now I never thought we'd see the day that coaches, players were talking about the spawns being so bad that they'd actually prefer the squad spawn system of, you know, the Modern Warfare games what Infinity would work on. And, you know, it was mainly a negative compared to what we used to have back in good Call of Duty games that I'm not going to mention by name with the spawn systems. But arguably, squad spawns, at least towards the end of, let's say, MW19, was somewhat predictable, because once one guy spawned up, you knew the other team was spawning around them. And I think certain players, it actually really benefited them to know that was how the game worked. Nowadays, the spawns don't work like that anymore, but the logic is just so bad that it makes it almost impossible. Actually, we'll see what Slasher has to say on that later on today. This was a change, though, made. Now, I don't really think I've ever experienced this personally, but if you're killed while you've got a cruise missile on, it won't explode in midair anymore, so probably that's a good change. One change that wasn't a good one, though, was this, because they said, I'm pretty sure, that this was going to be fixed. They were saying they were doing it. I just don't understand what is going on here, right? These are one of those changes that I don't know why it was necessary in the first place to change this hill on sub base. I think this hill was okay inside that, like, bunker bit. They moved it to the outside. There was a contest spot in this building from on top of the staircase, which they did fix, but it was actually still existing under the staircase, such as this, and they said they were going to put it back in and fix it, and they haven't fixed it. So, you know, I just don't understand what's going on over there. I know that, to be fair, the quality assurance guys that work for Sledgehammer were all, like, laid off by the Microsoft acquisition, merger with Activision, all this type of stuff, so maybe that is involved. But yeah, there's lots of questions about CoD as it stands, and we'll see what Nadeshot has to say on that in a second. So this clip was doing the rounds the other day. Of course, we talked about it in quite some length. Now, I think Ben was kind of done dirty here, because this was a clip from right at the start of the game. Obviously, he's using a gun that's, like, no longer meta at all, and you know, Cellium put it on the timeline. There was lots of reaction to it, mainly just because Ben was getting pretty defensive over this whole thing, right? He didn't want to talk about it, he didn't want to discuss it, and, you know, he was getting a bit hurt over the whole matter, and I understand it, but, you know, as I've said before, I think you've got to kind of take it in some respect as well. So anyway, Ben was on the Dope Check episode the other day. It's a quality episode. It's on the Breaking Point YouTube channel right now if you guys are looking for a 3-hour, like, epic to go and listen to. But Ben was giving, you know, continuing to give some pretty hot takes on certain topics, especially on Big Wake, obviously, of the Minnesota Rocker. Now, Now, I think I'm inclined to agree with Ben on this topic. I've had my questions about Awakening, and, you know, accuracy is playing really well at this game. It was a pretty hot take that I made very early on in the title, that if Awakening doesn't start performing better, he's the man I'd look to make a change for rather than accuracy. And I think that it's turned out over the last few weeks that's probably a reasonable statement. Now, would you go as far to say that Wake is not a championship player? That's another question entirely, and that's something that, you know, BenJNissim was making his thoughts known on the episode, and maybe the evidence points to that in some regards. Sure, on LAN, his numbers are pretty decent historically, but the success hasn't really been there over the last few years, apart from the FeLo team, of course, online during MW19. Since then, he's been on various teams, he's dropped decent numbers, but it's never really worked out on Boston and elsewhere, and this season so far, maybe this just isn't his game. But the idea that Awakening is ever going to be a piece of a championship-winning team on that kind of level is a debate that's worth having. But of course, look, it's BenJNissim making this take, and at the same time that he makes this take criticizing Wake pretty hard, he's simultaneously seems, I think he was actually a good sport about it on the show, but he definitely was getting a bit soft over it, I would say, on the flank, especially when all that stuff was getting brought up. So, you know, the theory would be Ben's happy to dish it out, but he's not so willing to take it, and this is what FeLo gets across as well.
Bro, I'm gonna put it to you this way: Wake's not a championship player. I'm done with waiting for this guy to come around. I'm done. I mean, listen, obviously played great amount for 2019 Florida, but whatever. A lot of people claim Sarklet cheese, eat sounding cute cheese, whatever. We can argue that one. Then the last couple of years, the 2 years on Florida, and then one on Boston, you know, just hasn't been that guy. He's slaying, but he's not really playing for the win. And then this year, slang's not there, and you know, I thought the mistakes that he made, and you know, Octane and Zuma pointed out on the flank, like just kind of tweaking and not really sure what to do in S&D. Some situations is tough to see because they're getting a great contribution from Lamar. Where you pointed out, Linz is a clear Rookie of the Year candidate and may be sort of at the top of that conversation. Reese has given them some good contribution. You're going to get what you get with Reese, but you know, Reese has made finals in the CDL. He's definitely got the caliber player in them. I just think at the end of the day, yeah, they might be a top of the rest, but they ain't being the top teams awake. And if I'm Minnesota management right now, if they're not already thinking about or pivot strategy from Wake after this major, they really should be. They shouldn't be kidding themselves. They shouldn't be living in denial. Like the next couple of weeks are huge for Wake because I do think, unfortunately, if they have bigger aspirations, he's the next guy to go here.
Now, what I'll say is, I mean, if you're going to dish out your opinion on people very often, you have to know how to take people's opinion on you very often. And if you expect any other way, then you're just a little bitch. Respectfully. Like, if you're going to sit and openly give your opinion very often, and you are not willing to take it ever back, that's a very one-sided street that's not very realistic. It's very entitled, in my opinion. I think Ben's a cool dude. I've known Ben for a while. But obviously, when it comes to that, he has to be a little bit more realistic.
So I think Ben is going to have a hard time escaping that clip, actually, because even in the tweet that we just saw there when he was criticizing Wake, a lot of the replies were posting that clip of Ben and saying, like, you know, who is this guy to criticize type thing. And I think, like, Ben could have, if he'd have owned it more than he did, then I think he would have kind of got away with it. But he didn't own it as much as maybe he should have done, so he ran into issues. I think FeLo's kind of, like, on the money as well, really, because he's not criticizing Ben and his opinions, because I don't think Ben, you know, he's not necessarily like he's not entitled to say what he believes. He's more criticizing the idea that if he thinks that you're going to get away with talking trash on certain players or just criticizing various things and then not taking that criticism yourself, it's not going to work out for the better. So I thought some interesting back and forth between the two of those guys. We'll see what happens whenever any developments made over the coming days. Obviously, Trey, also on the show, was also making some hot takes as well. I know this was going around. I saw Trey say this and I thought, okay, we have to make one of these like Bleacher Report style graphics for this. And this was Trey's take effectively on Miami. He's not a big fan, if you guys haven't worked out already, on Spanish CoD in general, the playstyles they have, and yeah, effectively his opinion is Erik in for JurNii isn't going to make any difference. It's going to be the same thing regardless. But Zero's a CoD champion and MVP, 2017 Stage 1 playoffs on Splice back in the day, and he can also take the heat back, so, you know, he's not getting the criticism of stuff like this that maybe BenJNissim is. But there also was last night an update on the supposed Ricochet anti-cheat, which is apparently in the game, if you guys have actually noticed this at all. Now, over the last few days, there's been lots of talk. Does it even work? Does it do anything? Lots of pros are really annoyed that in the top end of ranked play, there just isn't much you can do. You're playing lots of hackers all the time, and it doesn't really seem like there's massive repercussions for it. It's a major problem in the game. The anti-cheat always seems to be 1, 2, 3, 4 steps behind what the cheap software, I don't know, like manufacturers are coming up with. But this is what Activision actually say on it yesterday. The anti-cheat system, despite rumours, was not offline at all this weekend, even though maybe it seemed like it was. There was a portion of analytical system taken down for updates, but everything is online. 6,000 accounts were banned this weekend because of it, which maybe sounds like a lot, but I don't really know if that is a substantial amount. I mean, think about the amount of people that play CoD. 6,000 accounts banned doesn't really seem like it's going to do that much. And I know that pros have said, look, there needs to be a way that if we report someone cheating in ranked and they actually are cheating, someone should be able to like eliminate them immediately rather than relying on this whole process. I always thought the way that Counter-Strike did it was kind of cool. Like they used to have something called Overwatch where if you wanted and you were like considered to be a solid enough player, they would let you go and actually review cheat cases. So I don't know if this is necessarily the best idea really, especially in CoD, but it did work in CS, and to be fair in CoD, like the actual, to be able to do the demo viewer to make this work in theater mode and stuff, it wouldn't really work, but it was one way that Valve came up with to say, alright, solid players can go and review matches that we think suspected cheaters have played in, and if they were to go into the match and they would see the guy spin botting or obviously aim hacking or whatever, they could just report him and the guy would get banned pretty quickly if a few guys agreed that was what was going on. Of course, ideally, the anti-cheat system needs to be better, and in Valorant, it's much more intrusive, and therefore it is more effective. Is it 100% effective though? No, and it's always a difficult battle really. So this is what Nadeshot says in reply to this. Call of Duty, I love you. I love all the bundles and customization that we've gotten this year, despite most people's complaints. I buy them all, which maybe isn't the best thing to say just because he's saying, like, I don't like my complaints are my complaints, but I'm still going to spend all the money anyway, which is kind of exactly what CoD wants, you know what I mean? I'm sure they would absolutely love it if loads of their players were, you know, in this manner. They still buy all the stuff, but they complain, but they still buy all the stuff anyway. But for real, Ricochet is absolutely terrible, and regardless of data shared with the community, it is not working. Ranked MW3 is plagued with cheaters, and I don't even want to know what Resurgence looks like. You gave us the same game as last year's, which I honestly can't complain about. Gave us movement back, gunplay is solid, and once again, the in-game content has been great. You guys do so many things right, but just can't keep up with all the missteps that you take. Fix the anti-cheat. This should be the biggest priority that you have internally. Then invest in higher tick rate servers. This might not be a huge deal for the casual community and your marketing efforts, but the impact it'll have on the future titles and player engagement cannot be understated. I love this game, we're on the right track, but please fix these glaring issues before we start getting slammed with news and marketing about this year's new title launch, which is a pretty funny way to conclude because that's exactly how it will go. They won't do anything to the Ricochet anti-cheat system, and then give it a couple of months when we get to May, it's bang, the new COD's coming out, and it's time to put your money down to hit the pre-orders or whatever they do. So yeah, I think he's right on the money really in terms of the issues with the anti-cheat system. And we saw the other day Shotzzy potentially getting sued or whatever by this apparent cheater, and that's not going to go anywhere, let's be honest. But, you know, it's understandable that the pros and players like Nadeshot, when you run into a guy and you get killed in a dodgy way, you think, damn, is this guy legit? Is he cheating? And it's quite easy to say, oh, this guy must be dodgy for whatever reason. And Nadeshot wasn't happy with this clip. Now, it turns out, I believe that this guy saw Nade through the wall here, and, you know, as Nadeshot says, clip was clearly saw my name tag through the wall. Kid needs to be in challenges if he's legit. I still think as streamers, you know, could play it a lot, but Ricochet doesn't work. Top 250 are riddled with hackers. It's hard not to accuse anything that is even remotely suspect, which I totally understand. And even this is the point on the PC checks, the monitor cams. They try and use in challenges to prevent this, but as Clay says, there's so many ways around those things. Like, I think if you're not an idiot, you can probably find a way to get around a PC check and a monitor cam. And Clay says, like, either make the anti-cheat more invasive and next level, or it's basically chalked. Or I guess one of the options is go back to console, which I think is arguably, especially for challenges, the like #1 thing that we need to do for next year. The pro play, you know, people aren't really going to cheat in pro play on LAN, apart from maybe Jimbo. Like, it's probably not going to happen, is it? People aren't going to be plugging in USB sticks to their main stage PC, but in challenges, it's definitely a problem. So very much interested in your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.